Hello, hello. Welcome to this talk. Tássia will present it. She's a Debian developer and a teacher in Canada. It's called Debian Installer Usability Testing Take 2, I think. It's not on the slide, but Take 2. Let's welcome her.
Thank you everyone. I'm happy to see some friendly faces in this room. Thank you for being there. Yeah, it's true. It's Take 2, because it's the second round of usability tests. The first round, so I'll be mentioning two phases of study, and the first phase was presented last year in DebConf in Kochi. So if you're interested, you can also watch the presentation by Juliana, which is he's part of the team. So I'm not the only author of this study. It's me, Tássia, Anthony Nadeau, Juliana Bozon, and Justin Bax, who are all watching us on streaming. Thank you guys for being there. So the quick outline, I won't go point by point because we cannot afford losing time, but it's there for your reference. Just a background, what usability is. So we are interested in evaluating user interfaces, computer-human interfaces, and we are interested in seeing how easy it is to use our computer system. In our case, how easy and clear it is to use our installer, Debian installer. Actually, how the process of installing Debian is easier because there's not only one installer. So the phases of the study, first last year, July-August, between July and August 2023, and this is the second phase between May and June 2024. Phase 1. We focus on the standard installer only. So we basically, the task was asking the users to go to the website, find the image to download, so the default image, and that was the netinst installer. And we focus on the standard default installation of Debian, and we compare with other distributions. So we compare with Tails, Ubuntu, and Fedora, and we also compare with Calamares, which is the installer in the Debian Live image. At the end, we concluded that with all compiled distros and Calamares had more user-friendly interfaces. So it was easier for users to use those, not only the interface, but also the documentation. And we managed, so it's ahead. Okay, thank you. We managed to get a few suggested changes to the website, which improve the user experience, but not to the installer itself. So that's a result of phase 1. In phase 2, so we already did this overview of how is Debian placed in the universe of other distros, but now diving into Debian, how can we improve our situation? So Calamares is already available for Debian in the live image, so why not comparing those two experiences? That was the idea of this second round. So we compare the Debian installer, again the netinst ISO, which is the default, and the Calamares installer from the Debian Live. And now our research question, so how can the Debian installer and or documentation be improved to give users a better experience? No change from phase 1, but now we added, is there a correlation between a user experience on Debian and its installation process and which installer was being used? And we are looking for this correlation. Okay, and we will compare those two, as I said, Calamares and DI. Recruitment of volunteers, just an overview. We had a feedback from last year that our population was maybe biased because we had students from my course, and yeah, it was a very similar pool of users, of testers. So we tried to recruit outside classrooms, so we still, the college is our source of volunteers, so we distributed posters all around the college. We had 3 different designs. This is the one that I like the most, but we had 3 different designs, which also helped to call attention of different users. And we spread around those flyers, those posters in the college, in billboards. And we also added, to attract new users, we added a raffle of a laptop. We had a donation of that laptops to the club. So we have a Floss Club, and the Floss Club is actually running the study. So the Floss Club offered a computer, one of those laptops, as a raffle among the testers, among the volunteer testers. And we are quite sure that this attracted many volunteers. So the challenge in terms of timing, we had a big challenge because since the study now was public and we were outreaching the whole college, we had to also pass through the ethics board. So Vanier College Ethics Board had to approve our study, and that means some paperwork, and we had to prepare everything for their approval before we can start. And that caused that the study, when they finally approved, it was almost too late. So we were already at the end of the semester, and we had to run the study actually in the last week of exams and vacations. So it was not ideal in terms of recruitment. For the next time, we plan to do better. Setup. So we had 21 testers that really gave us data, but one pilot tester. And from that, so the pilot tester actually became an observer. So we had 5 observers this time compared to only 2 last year. And also last year we had 10 testers, so this year we doubled. We had 10 computers from a donation of an organization in Montreal that also helped, like the launch of the study, we had 10 computers running Debian Live, and people could explore a little bit. They could use, we find it much easier when you already provide the computer with a running system for the curious people. So that was fun and nice. That happened during our Debian Stuff event. Here, the launch happened in a local meeting. Then we had many of the participants became our study volunteer. This is the main testing room. So not all tests were running there, but most of them. What else? Numbers. 2-hour slots allocated per tester. So then you can see how many human hours this took. 2 online forms. So we had the demographic form. People would input their information, and at the end, feedback form about their experience. And I think I covered that. And also we provided 2 USB keys, one with DI and the other one with Debian Live. So just a quick overview. Last year we had 3 parts. First one was prepare a bootable media with Debian 12. Second one, proceed to the installation. And third part, reboot and explore your new system. So testers would also give some feedback about the interface, which was GNOME interface. This year we removed that third part. And what we have is prepared the 2 bootable medias. Now, since we needed to have the 2 installers, and the part 1B and 2B were half of the sample got first the task to install with Calamares and then to install with GI, and the second half of the sample got the opposite, first GI and then Calamares, so that the order should not interfere with the result. And then the third part was evaluate your experience. So this is not included in the results because it was just to fill out the feedback form. Typical observation session, how it went. We would greet the volunteer, present the consent form, read with them the consent form, explain the study, ask them to sign the consent form. Then they would fill the demographics form, which would basically ask about their background and private information. Then we would give instructions, more explanation about the study, just to make sure that we're all on the same track. Then we would open the task list. And the task list would be just step by step what we wanted them to do. And that would mark the beginning of the observation session. We started to time each step on the way, because we use these as variables. Then we'll start taking notes. So either questions they make us, that they would pose to us, or questions we could ask them. We ask them to be verbose. So I put here testers in verbose mode. We ask them to be explicit about their train of thought so that we could follow exactly their feelings. Well, not exactly, but I mean, the most as possible. And that we could note down the struggles and what is the real experience when they are using those systems. Then when needed, so they were going task by task, and whenever needed, there would be 3 levels of helps. So yes, we would answer questions, but the idea is that we also wanted a systematic way to give help so that we could keep track of those. So the first level would be just an explanation or a more verbose explanation of the task itself, but with not many hints. Then the second, if the explanation was not enough, then we'd give the second level, which is a hint of how to perform that task. And if the hint was not enough, then we would give a tutorial, which is basically explaining how to do, like, step by step, that like getting their hands so that they could finish the task. And with that, we would measure. At the end, we're going to show a heat map there you can see how easy or hard each part was. And so during the test, internet searches were allowed, so they could read online, Stack Overflow, ChatGPT, whatever they wanted, and even video tutorials if they wanted. So as if they were at home installing Debian. That was the idea. And at the end, we had a feedback form that they would give the feedback about how the experience was for them. Now, so results. The average time taken to complete the test was 1 hour and 23 minutes. And this is only from when we start taking time, because there was always, the setup would take also about 15, 20 minutes before getting started. And in phase 1, half of the time, so that's an interesting thing that happened. So half of the time of the observation sessions were dedicated to the first part, which was to prepare the bootable media, because that was a pain point last year, because as part of the instructions in the website, there were also checksum, verify the checksum and signatures, and that step, those 2 steps would take a long time and energy, and students would be confused and would need to get help online and also our help. So it was something that this time we didn't have, because the website was updated and we didn't have that instructions anymore. So it was easier for users. And since it was, we already knew it would be quicker, we would have time to do the 2 installations to be able to compare. So that was what allowed us to perform the 2 installations in a reasonable time. So I will go quickly on demographics. So basically, who did our studies, who were the volunteer testers? 21 people, 18 students and 3 professionals. Age, most of them under 25 years old. So you see 24 is here. There's only one 41-year-old. Gender, most male, about 1/3, a bit less than 1/3 female, and no one identified as non-binary. Language, we had a variety of languages, but mostly French and English. But we did have this colored, that was a good point, and I also outreach for translation in Debian during the study, because many of them chose to run the installer in their language, and there was one case that we actually gave up on that language, and we we went back to English because he was confused because the translation was not super good. So I don't remember exactly which of those languages, but yeah. So the study also served as an outreach for new translators. In terms of operating system they use in their personal computers, we had a variety, but Windows is the majority, and about 10% Mac OS, and about 10% also of Linux users. And there was one user that had the 3 systems at home. About 2/3 of the users expressed some familiarity with Linux, and even about 10% said a lot, so they use on a regular basis, which was a different scenario than last year. I will talk about that later. But yeah, if you see, we have about 65-67% of testers that had some familiarity with Linux. And most of our testers had some experience with installations of operating systems, which is also new from last year. So only 24% said none, so they had never installed, but 62% had some experience, and 14% a lot, so they are used to install operating systems. And in terms of general proficiency with computers, 90% self-identify as intermediate or advanced. You see 62 intermediate and about 30% advanced users of computers. Only less than 10% said they are beginner users. So this is the classical heat map for those who are used to usability testing studies. The green here means that they had no issue, it was an easy task. Yellow means somewhat easy, but needed the verbose, remember the 3 levels, so they needed the explanation for the yellow. For the orange, somewhat difficult, so they needed a hint. And the red, they needed actually a tutorial, so they were not able to perform without our step-by-step. Okay, and last year we had a lot so just now to compare what was last year, I opened here. So that was our heat map on phase 1, and you see it was much more orange and red here, especially in the first part, which was preparing the bootable media. And there was an improvement from that to this year. We still had a few oranges and red, but not as bad as last year. And in terms of task list, again, so part 1 was to prepare the bootable medias, the 2 USBs. The part 2 here is actually phase 1B is the Debian installer, netinst image, and 2B is the Calamares installer. So you can see there was no struggle with Calamares, but we'll comment that in the analysis. So we did statistical analysis, which we didn't do last year, so there was also an improvement from this second phase. We had basically 4 control variables, which installer is being used, general experience from the user, OS experience, OS installation experience, and Linux experience. So the first general experience is experience with computers, and then OS installation and Linux. And the 3 response variables was from their feedback, difficulty rating, so they could rate difficulty level from 1 to 5. So difficulty rating given to each installer, so we ask for one and for the other, time taken to complete each task or section, and help needed for each task or section. And our goal is to find which control variables affected which response variables. And we did hypothesis testing, and we had one hypothesis to test for every dependent and independent variable pair. using a significance level of 0.05, which is pretty standard. We will aim to accept hypotheses when the probability that the result we are analyzing is less than 5%, the chances are less than 5% to be random. Okay? So if the chances are less than 5%, we say, okay, we can take it as true. We use Python with SciPy stats library, and I say we use, but it was mainly Justin, so one of our team members that took the task to do the analysis. And the statistical test he used, chi-square test of independence and variations. So when he just necessary, he used the variations and Fisher exact tests. So I'm not a stats expert, and Justin will be online in case there are more statistical questions that I cannot answer. But you'll see the results. I can buy the results as a non-expert users, and but all the information will be also available in case you want to dive deeper on that. But the results that we came to share are that netinst was found to be given a higher difficulty rating than Calamares, and those numbers here, N is for how many data points we have for each hypothesis. So N 33 and P value of 0.0003. So that's the probability I was mentioning. So whenever this number, the P number here, the P value, is lower than 0.05, then we can accept the hypothesis. We judge this a very important result. We know for sure, that the testers found the netinst installer easier than Calamares. Netinst was found to have a higher install time than Calamares, and those are the numbers. So you see the p-value, we can also take it. So that was a straightforward result, that Calamares is not only easier, but also it was faster to install with Calamares. And for that, yeah, it's just how Calamares is designed as compared to the Debian. Specifically, we're using the netinst, so we'd have to install packages from the internet. And overall, so all comparable tasks except 2 were found to be faster with Calamares than with netinst. The 2 steps were locale and configuring the network, that there was not enough evidence to confirm the hypothesis or to reject what we call the null hypothesis in those cases. So not to say that they were not faster, it's just that we can't make a conclusion. In those 2 points or those 2 tasks, we couldn't make a conclusion because the p-value was higher than 0.05. So we can't reach. Then participants needed more help with netinst than with Calamares in all comparable tasks, which we saw that from the heat map. So if you look at the heat map, yeah, heat map for the Calamares was all green. And when using netinst, people with a higher technical ability and Linux experience were faster to install than people with no experience. So then if you look this with the next point, and tests were inconclusive when looking at the same comparison using Calamares. We found this very interesting. Why? Because it shows that your technical ability, using netinst, your technical ability will have an impact in your experience. And with using Calamares, it doesn't really matter how much experience you have. You will have the same user experience at the end. And finally, people with experience installing other operating systems were able to find the Calamares ISO faster. Because this is one thing that took a long time for the Calamares, and I'm going to show the time variables soon. And you'll see that to find the Calamares ISO, which is the Debian Live image ISO, is not that easy in our website. And of course, this is not a problem with Calamares itself, but it's a problem of our website and how we organize the files there. So how users can find what they need. So just a bit more of statistical analysis. So median values. So the median time to complete the installation using the netinst image was almost 56 minutes, and with Calamares, 35 minutes. So with Calamares, it was 38% faster overall. The mean time to find the ISO. So that's when I said with Calamares it took longer to find the ISO, almost 4 minutes, and netinst around 1 minute. And that was the only task where Calamares was slower. Then the median time to configure users, so the step to configure users with netinst and Calamares was 2.5 faster. Median time to partition disks with netinst and Calamares was 5 times faster. And mean time waited for the OS to install with netinst 32 minutes and Calamares 14. Again, 2.3 times faster. So yeah, I finished showing data on like the results, and now I'll talk about those results and some discussion. So in comparison with phase 1, this time we had no more checksums and signature verification, and this improved the experience. Like we saw users less frustrated than we saw in first phase. Demographics. So this year we had more diversity. We had students from all the programs of the college, not only computer science, and we also had a larger sample. We still have mainly students, so that's the diversity was more on the background or the area of interest than on the occupation was student for most of them. But we had a larger sample. We doubled the amount of testers. And one thing that we hadn't foreseen is that just by chance, the populations we get, so that the testers we got, volunteers we got, were in general more tech savvy and more exposed to Linux than last year. Okay, so this we didn't, as I said, we couldn't know in advance, but that's what we found. So we had much less research on the web, so they were more able to finish the process with less problem, and we see a much greener heat map than we saw last year. Now going into each part, so for part A, all testers were able to download the netinst with no issue, no surprise, because there is a big blue button in the website now that you download from that button. This is also one of our the results of our last study, the last round, that the download button would take you to another page with more instructions. And we managed to have it now, the download button, extra downloads, which was good. For the live image, many testers got into a navigation, what we call a navigation trap. They would click on the Try Debian Live before installing, instead of really. So I'm going to show that because it was so impressive how we saw users doing that time over time, and just. So if you go on Debian website and yeah, demonstrations. Well, my network is, I think we don't need that, right? So I'll just leave it like that for now, but at the end I can try to show. But yeah, the Try Debian Live is a link. It should be just a section title, I think. But then they click on that and they can't get out of it, and they wouldn't find what we were asking them to find, which was just the live image GNOME with a GNOME desktop environment. If I managed to show at the end, I will show. There was some difficulty with the process of flashing the image. So this is still from last year and still this year. Users don't know, like general users don't know this process of flashing. And those that already installed all the operating system, yes, they had an idea. But those who had never done, it's a pain point. And then part 1B and 2B, which were the installation itself, the difference between graphical install and install was not clear. We said that last year, and we're repeating that. This is not clear for users. They don't think about graphical and text mode, or they don't know what. So without a historical perspective, it's hard. Technical concepts that are not common knowledge bring confusion to the process. So even though many users reach to the end and they are able to install, but just having terms that they don't understand bring confusion and diminishes the user experience. So just having completed the task and having a green in the heat map doesn't really mean that the process is perfect and that couldn't be improved. There are many concepts that are not of general knowledge and a general population don't really understand. So from our perspective, the steps that are more confusing are network configuration, host name, domain name. Disk partitioning is also a session that brings confusion, and network mirror, that thing in the Debian, in the DI, is still brings confusion to the process. Part 2B, which was using Calamares with the Debian Live, all testers were able to complete the installation with no issue. None of those appear. Well, disk partitioning appears. There's a session, but it's more guided than in the Debian installer. But I recognize that maybe disk partitioning would be the most complicated step with Debian, with Calamares, but users were able just to go through it. And I didn't mention part C because part C is the feedback form. So there was nothing to discuss. Now, some suggestions from our side. If possible, again, make some text bold, because users don't read those paragraphs. We see users don't read. So either we find ways to bring emphasis on some words, keywords, or it's really hard. So only ask what there is no obvious default. So if we can have a default, and if for advanced users or whatever, we would have a button that would allow for a more in-depth setup, that would be great. Either advanced options in each session, or also having another image which would be less configured for more advanced users or users with particular needs. But for the general population, many things that we ask maybe could be reviewed and not be asked anymore. Clarify the menu boot options, because we said it's still a struggle. Like, people don't understand what's the difference between graphical install and install. And for the graphical installer, again, we saw that happening. Like, people were confused about the desktop environment, which one to choose. So either in the installer or in the website, we could have some previews of GNOME, Cinnamon, KDE. If we give the options, it would be good to help the users to choose the options to have a more informed decision. So having some previews somewhere. Okay, regarding the website and documentation, make it easier for users to find the image they need. Right now, it's not. We really need to think about how to redesign, and I'm actually talking about that, but I know the website team is working on that, on the redesign, the layout of the website. But we urgently need that to make the images more classified in a way that is easier for users to find what they need. We could also suggest tools for users to prepare the bootable media, because, again, people don't know they don't understand the process, and don't know which tools to use. So it would be good if we could have some tutorials on that. Use visuals as much as possible. I know for accessibility, we are always concerned about screen readers, and we want to have text option. But for those who use visuals, and if we can, like the website, have a bit more of especially thinking on a more the younger generation, that even and not only younger generation, but having graphics that help people understand the process would be great. But I talk about the younger generation because I work with them, and I know that they struggle with text. So if there is like just an infograph, it helps. Consider creating video tutorials that would describe all requirements, all needed pieces, and follow along the whole process. I know this is not only for the Debian to produce, but Debian users, even we could be producing that. So this is a call like for the whole community. I'm not putting the pressure on the website team, but I think we as a community could provide that. Okay. And just to close, now some study limitations. Sample size is always a limitation. We increased, but we could have more. Lack of population diversity. As I said, we're still among the students, and we didn't manage to get out of school to get volunteers out of school. Just a few. I think a couple were out of school. Self-reported variables. So many of those variables, the students, the testers will select the options themselves. So we are not really sure about if the level of expertise, for instance, was accurate. Data collection. So we did some errors in the collection of data and time, and we had some points that were, or some testers that we had to invalidate. And limited ability to interfere with upstream development. So I put that also as part of the study limitation because, of course, we do the study trying to help with the development process, and the full cycle would be that we would bring feedbacks, and then this will be incorporated somehow. And right now, like, we don't really have inside Debian installer. Yeah, our ability to interfere with the development is very limited, and thinking of Calamares, which is upstream, not really in Debian, was also, so yeah, I just added this as a study limitation. And I want to give some time for questions, so I'll just quickly go future work, collaborate more with Debian installer and website teams. Statistics 101 for the whole team. As I said, just one member of the team did the statistics, and we would all like to dive into that and be more able to follow and contribute with statistics. And more usability on Debian. So we are thinking of the next round, and we would receive input from anyone that want to have usability testing in Debian. It doesn't need to be the installer, anything in Debian that you would benefit from. Just take a look at this. I put the Salsa repository for the study, and we're thinking of the next one. And thank you all. Thank you, first of all, Debian installer and Calamares developers, Debian contributors and sponsors, our pilot testers, Shahi and Donna and Greg, that helped with graphics, the poster and the website, or poster and the slides, and Eastern Bloc, who donated, the organization that donated computers, and Vanier College for the space and network, and of course all observers and testers, and thank you for listening. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes.
We have 5 minutes for questions, so if you have questions, raise your hand.
So during phase 2 goals, you said that one of the goals was to measure whether the choice of an installer affects the user experience. However, there were no questions regarding the experience in the installed system. Was that deliberate or just due to the lack of time? And also, have you checked whether the traditional netinst image and the Calamares image produce nearly identical results? Basically, are there any significant differences in the installation results?
So, very good question. We assume, so we didn't add, last year we had the third part was a little bit of the user experience in the system. This year we decided to remove it because at the end it's a GNOME system and their experience. So first of all, it was a positive feedback. We didn't see any struggle because then we used to ask if they could like read emails, and so they would open a browser and games, and they would just play a little bit, and that worked well. So from last year, we didn't see the need to repeat that this year, but and we also didn't compare because at the end they get to the same point. So both installation process get to the same point. I'm not 100% that all packages installed in one and the other, so I didn't compare myself to guarantee that it's identical, and I think it's probably not identical, but from what one of our testers could tell, it would be like the end result was the same. From our user perspective, like in the test itself, without doing much digging, you would see the same thing. You would see the Debian, the GNOME desktop configuration and the same applications installed, so there wouldn't be much of a difference. So there wouldn't be nothing to compare, actually.
Right. Well, in part, I was going to say what you just said. I know for a fact it's not the same. It's not the same output. For more advanced people, the difference is very large. And if we did a full after install experience, I think even newcomers could find differences after installing with Calamares. We had a quite high-profile bug due to the choice of install packages we had just after the bookworm release. But, that only happened to Calamares install systems. I was thinking of two things. One of them, you partly addressed it. I understand it's a needed study for making Debian grow, for helping the adoption. But then again, the install process is something that our users usually do once and then don't do it anymore. I didn't know what you just said in the end, that you had done a usability test on the installed desktop. That I think that should be partly more interesting because it will give more insight. But of course, that also falls within the scope of other projects, such as the different desktop environments we have. But if just for showing how our processes compare to others. At the beginning, you said you had done some comparisons with other Linux distributions. I think that even with all the differences we have in that, you could also add to the comparison how easy is it to obtain or install or just give the images and install non-free operating systems, because I mean that's also something that users can appreciate. That I haven't tested it, but I think we will win in that comparison.
Very good.
So,
yeah, good thing. Maybe round 3 could be that too. But yeah, Gunnar, the thing is, when we think about what Debian is and what we build as a distribution, like when you are comparing the installed system, we're actually, when we are evaluating the installed, so the end result, what the experience of the user is with GNOME, is not with Debian. So what they will report, as we had, so last year, so I invite you to watch the presentation from Juliana from last year. that we had that as part of the study. And for instance, users would have the struggle to find the menu. GNOME. Activities, like they don't know, they click around, they don't see the activities, and activities not really, doesn't really tell it's a menu. So there were comments like that from last year. But again, it was the interface of GNOME. So at the end, what we do, we can report the bug upstream, but there's nothing really we can do as Debian. I understand that what we bring, one of the major things that we do as a distribution is to provide a means for the user to install the system. And then, of course, all the packages and install the packages, but just having the system up and running. And I understand that when you say that the installation happens only once and the users use it many times, but what is happening is that if the installation doesn't happen, we can never have the system being used. So if that is a blocker, then that's why I think it's really important to work with the installation process. And we're out of time. So I'm available for questions if other people want to chat. And also, I don't know if you made a note of the repository, but we are open to collaboration.
So thank you very much. Let's thank Tássia.
And the whole team. Thank you guys on the stream.